Hey, welcome to this episode of Cleartone Podcast. I'm your host, David Rodriguez, and today's special guest is Carlos Jimenez. He's a freelance trumpet player out in the LA area. Carlos, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, David. Glad to be here.
Great. And so, I want to ask you the first question here. Um, how did you get started in music? When did you first become involved?
Well, I first started in fourth grade. That's
Okay.
when we got the sheets. They send you home with the sign up sheet on wanting to sign up for band in elementary school. Um, I grew up in a household that always had music. No matter where I was, whether I stayed home or I went to grandma's house or someone else's house, we were there's music going on all day long. Uh, so I always kind of had a an ear for it. I've always been really about it, really all about music. So it was in fourth grade when I first had my first experience with music. I went home. I showed my parents the sign up sheet, and at first I wanted to do everything else but trumpet. But my dad was like, "No, you should do trumpet," and I was like, "No, like maybe clarinet or violin or something or cello or even trombone." And he's no, my dad's like, "No, you should do trumpet. We'll sign it if you do trumpet." I'm like, okay, fine, trumpet it is. So and it's so it was, yeah, since the fourth grade, fourth and fifth grade, and all through middle school and high school and up until now, I've been doing
Great.
it.
Yeah. And then you were outside of, did you just do band, or once after elementary school, there were more options to do different types of groups?
Yeah. So, through elementary school and middle school, I'm still trying to figure out what, this thing is, what I'm doing, what trumpet is, and all that. And then it wasn't until about eighth grade where I started discovering, there was programs outside of just school, and coming from a family where we really didn't have much of an income to, spend on extra lessons or extra, band programs. I was always in the free band stuff that was going around. So there's a jazz band called Jazz America that
Okay.
I did, and it was completely free. Run by Richard Simon and Roger Newman, and it was funded by Buddy Collette. Um, I did that. I was in a program before that. I was in a program at USC called LAJ, which is also a youth program that was run by students at USC at the time, and it was a big band, and it was for high school students. And I just got the great opportunity to happen to join, when I was in eighth grade, which was great. It opened up so many doors, uh, and it just opened up a whole new world of trumpet playing to me. Um,
So how did that happen? How did you get that opportunity?
well, I think it was my mom and her sister that I think her sister was teaching at a school, and she just kind of got this email saying, or saw a poster saying, there's band, this is jazz band that was being formed at USC that was going to be for high school students, come and audition. And I remember, I think she emailed my mom about it, and my mom was like, "Oh, we should go check it out." I was talking to my dad, and we should check it out. We should email them, see if you can watch the auditions. And so we did. We emailed the director, Jose Gurria, who was a percussionist at USC. We emailed him, and they said, "Yeah, of course. You can come in and watch the auditions." We told him, I was in eighth grade, still not much. I was still trying to grab a hold on these things, but nonetheless, we went over and we went. And I remember my father telling me, like, "Hey, you should bring your trumpet." And I was like, "What? Like, no, I don't want to do that." He's like, "No, you should bring your horn. You should take it. You never know. Just take it. Maybe they can give you some kind of a mock audition or something, or they can just hear you play and give you pointers, for next year." And I was like, "Oh, okay, fine. Let's do it." So I brought my horn, and it's funny because at the time too, I used to carry all of my books around all the trumpet books that I had. I used to carry them in like bag or a backpack. I
Okay.
had my Arbenz book in there, my a Clark book, all these elementary method books. I used to just carry them around in these bags, because I for some reason I was like, oh, you never know when I'm gonna need one of these books.
Sure.
So I remember showing up with all this stuff, and I watched a few of the auditions, and then they asked me if I'd like to try to to audition, just to play, and I was like, well, no, but they convinced me to do it, so I did it, and I knew nothing about jazz. The only thing I had listened to at that point was Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. That album was the first jazz album I listened to. So that's really all I knew about jazz, just that one album. But besides that, I had no idea how to do it or what to do. It was very new to me still. So I auditioned. I played and I played a Latin song. I played Sabor a Mi and Besame Mucho, which are
Okay.
the only songs I knew because growing up, I had always was only listening to mariachi and a lot of Spanish music because it's just what I grew up with. So I guess you can say almost Kind of Blue was my first like non Spanish album that I listened to. Um, so I auditioned. I played with both of those songs, and I couldn't really read well at all really at that time. But the thing that I had, I guess I had going was my sound was decent, and they really liked my sound, and I say my I always tell people I think I developed my sound early because I was always listening to mariachi and I always wanted to sound like them, so I try to imitate them. That crystal clean sound that they played with. You know, so the I remember when I played and then I had to play it maybe like two or three times because they called the head of the program and then they called the lady that was running the program to come in and listen to me and they listened to me and they said, okay, cool, well, thanks for coming in, this is kind of telling us more about the program, and they're like, and we'll call you back later today, and we're like, okay, cool, didn't think much of it. And then it was later that day that I think we went. My family just was kind of out and about, and we got a phone call from the director saying, "Hey, like we want Carlos to come in. We want him to come into the first rehearsal next week. You want to see how he does with the high school students as a middle schooler getting into the band." So that's kind of how it happened. I just happened to have my horn that day, and I played and I auditioned, and they just gave me that shot, which completely opened up a whole other world of music to me. It was great. It was hard. It was really hard because I had no idea what I was doing. I was definitely not liked by many of the guys in there because I was this kid that was trying to play jazz and had no idea what was going on. But it was definitely one of the better learning experience that I had. I got thrown into the pool with no floaties or anything. It's just like go,
Yeah, yeah, there you
figure
go.
it
The
out,
bike, yeah, with no training wheels. Here you
right?
go. Here's your push.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, that opened up a tremendous amount of opportunities after that. And it was great. It was great. I thank my dad all the time for forcing me to do that. Take my horn in that day.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's great. And then um after that you talked about another group you were participating with
Yeah, Jazz
from
America. Um,
okay, Jazz
yeah,
America. I'm sorry, Jazz in America?
Jazz America.
Jazz America.
Yeah, Jazz America. So Jazz America. The cool thing about the program at USC is that a lot of those guys were already doing programs out, other programs and stuff. And me being the younger kid, I was always kind of overhearing like what they were doing and stuff, and just trying to figure out what else I could do. And there was this one trombone player, and there's a great guy, and his parents were really nice, really really nice people. Um, he was playing another group, Jazz America, and they had kind of mentioned it to us before, but I was like, okay, yeah, like we'll get to it. But I remember the band at USC was gonna play at this restaurant on PCH out of Malibu called Gladstone's, and they were celebrating like the Black History Month, so they were having a big band every Sunday to come in and play Sunday and Saturday. And
Okay.
so the weekend of was the weekend before, I think, yeah, it was the weekend before, or it could have been the day before we were playing there. My parents, they were like, hey, why don't we go out for a drive and go see where this restaurant's at, and let's just go, just go check it out, and then we'll come back, just to hang out.
Sure.
And I was, no, I didn't really want to go out. I was like, nah, I just want to stay home. And my dad's, my dad and mom were like, no, come on, let's go hang out. Like, all right, fine. So we hop into the truck, and I remember we drove out to go see the restaurant, and my dad pulls off to the side, just to get off and walk around on the beach and stuff. And we heard there was another band there, so we were like, oh, like, let's go check it out. So we walk up, the sand, and we walk up to the restaurant. We're standing kind of outside on the rocks that they have around the restaurant, and I see this my buddy from the program playing trombone in the band, and I was like, oh, like that's His name was Tyler. I'm like, hey, no, it's Tyler. Like, this is awesome. Like, cool. So we stayed there and we watched them till they finished. I think they had like 2 more songs left. And his parents were there, and they came up to us and they were talking to my parents, and they were like, hey, like, he should do this program. Like, it's open to everybody and anybody, no matter what your experience is with the instrument. They welcome you, and they, it's a great program to learn how to play. And I remember they called the director over. His name was Richard Simon. He was there, and I believe Roger Newman was there, who's another, you know, an important person in my life.
Okay.
But Richard Simon was there, and I remember he came over and he gave us this flyer, about their summer band, their summer big band that was going to happen, and I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks after that. And we got to know him, and he gave us a flyer, and sure enough, my mom went home and she emailed him and set up an audition and made it into the band. I was for Jazz America right after that, which Jazz America was another one that just opened, I mean, so many doors with Richard and Simon, and I learned so much. They're two great educators that it was at that point where it was like, I was so hungry for this stuff that just doing that one summer of that band, like, I was hooked. I was hooked. So that was awesome. But yeah,
That's
that's
great.
how that happened. We're
Yeah.
just happened to be out, happened to see them. I was at the right place at the right time.
Right. Right. So, and did you take private lessons during that time? When did you start taking private lessons?
I didn't start taking private lessons until probably the summer between, or was it the spring semester or summer between my freshman year in high school and my sophomore year.
Okay.
Um, and I had kind of had lessons at the with the USC big band. They kind of gave you lessons after that, but it was not much. It was kind of more like a group thing that they were doing.
Okay.
But I mean, I got kind of my start there, but I didn't really start taking like actual one-on-one lessons until I was at until I was Jazz America, and Roger Newman told me about another program that was also free. That was called the Bill Green Mentorship Program, and I believe both of those programs are still around. The one at SC, I'm not sure, but I know Jazz America is still around. Obviously they age out at 21, I believe it is the age at 18 or 21, something like that. And then the Bill Green Mentorship Program, I believe, is still going. But the Bill Green Mentorship Program, you audition for that program, and if you get in, you get 10 free private lessons with guys that are working in the industry, and that are top notch players. And at the end of the season, you get to record an album and stuff. So I was like, yeah, like I was all about it. Roger Newman was like, come over, and audition. Just audition. Don't worry about it. Just come and audition. I'm like, okay, so same place. And this program, the cool thing about these two programs is they took place at the Musicians Union when it was on Melrose and Vine out in Hollywood.
Okay.
And I mean, the most awesome thing about having it be there is that you show up in the morning and then you see the other bands rehearsing there at the same time, the next room over, and sometimes you could hear them, and it was just like, man, like, it was awesome just being around all that, and seeing them. At the time I didn't know anybody, but that really pushed me to do kind of like my research on who people were and stuff, just to try to get to know who the players were, who I was listening to on albums and stuff. But so the Bill Green Mentorship Program, when I was there, I was assigned to an instructor, a teacher, trumpet teacher. His name's Sal Cracchiolo, who's to this day, he went from being my teacher, my mentor, to my best friend. And we call each other maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And with the pandemic going on, see each other maybe every other time. We'll hang out, socially distance, hang out
Okay.
and stuff. But Sal Cracchiolo was really the guy that was, the guy that just really made me want to play trumpet for the rest of my life and made me want to do music for the rest of my life. He's was the guy that was on every Poncho Sanchez album from the beginning. So I believe 2001 or 2002, I believe he was with them. So he was his original trumpet player for all those years. He's done probably every hip hop pop artist and most Latin and Latin jazz artists stuff, from then till now. And he's currently the lead player for Tower of Power. He's their lead trumpet player, and he's also with the Clint Hamilton Jazz Orchestra. He's done, been on numerous sessions and stuff. So he was a big deal already when I met him, and it was awesome, And like I said, I was just discovering who all these guys were. So he was my first private instructor, and it was new to me. I had no idea what private lessons were, but I was excited that I was finally getting private lessons because, like I said, I had gone years without really without a fundamental like player to, feed off of and stuff. So when I started studying with Sal, it was just a whole different ball game, and it was awesome. It was
Okay.
awesome.
And that was during your freshman sophomore year when you started
Yes,
studying with him?
yes, I think it was like the spring of my freshman year, going into the summer and stuff. Yeah, that's when that was, and I was studying with him up until he started playing with Tower of Power, and then he just, those guys are on the road 265 days out of the year, so it kind of became impossible to keep studying with him, And then after that, that's when I, moved on to play with other guys, but I always kept in touch with him. I
Okay.
always kept in touch, and still to this day, like I said, we're probably on the phone 2 to 3 days out of the week.
Right. Well, that's great.
Stuff.
That's great.
So yeah.
And so and it was during that time that once you started studying with him, you realized, hey, I want to do this as a career. This is my passion.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it was at that time when he was, because it was really up until that time where I still, I mean, I knew what jazz was and all this stuff, but I wasn't, sure. I still considered it new to me,
Okay.
even though I had kind of done, play with a few bands here and there. And he would, I'd go to his house, and along with playing, he'd play records for me. He'd play albums, he'd play, live concerts. He'd show me, all this stuff, and which is where I was like, oh man, like I was just soaking all this stuff in, and I mean, when it comes to big band, I love big band. One of my favorite lead players is Snooky Young. I love Snooky Young, and Sal was the one that introduced me to Snooky Young and his trumpet playing and who he was. And unfortunately, once I really knew who he was, and I wanted to go see him at he was doing a jazz concert at LACMA, and he did the jazz concert, and I wasn't able to go see him, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I can see him later. And he passed away, 2 weeks after that, and I
Oh,
didn't get
wow.
to meet Snooky, but and I was really bummed out. And since that day, I was always like, you know what, if I'm not gonna hesitate. I'm just gonna go to every jazz concert that I can, to that, where these guys, they're obviously older,
Hmm.
and try to catch something, you know. But yeah, it was really when I was started studying with Sal that I really knew I wanted to do this. And the people that were around at that time, Roger Newman was another. Say he was a saxophone player who's, oh man, his playing was awesome. It was beautiful. I mean, his when he played jazz, it was awesome. His arranging was it's he'd arrange a tune, or he'd write his original tunes, and it sounded like something Sammy Nestico would write, who we just
Just
lost
passed
a few
away. Yeah.
days ago. He just passed away, but it sounded like something that the Basie band would play. He'd write something, and it was like something off of like the Basie Straight Ahead album. It was just, I fell in love with that, and I was like, man, like this is awesome. Like this is what just being around that whole thing was awesome. So it was meeting those guys, and then just, I guess, really going out and, like, I did a lot of stuff outside of school. I was in the bands at school, but I did a lot outside of school. And I guess just being in that environment of, guys wanting to do the same thing, wanting to play, that was like, I was all about it, and some of those guys are still playing today. Some of them, went off to do different things, but that, we would motivate each other, like we want to do that. We want to sound like this guy, we want to play in these bands, it was that, I guess it's kind of like that support, and I'm like, no, this is what I really, really want to do,
Yeah.
alongside with my teachers and everybody that I had.
Yeah. Your feet. It was that energy you guys were feeding off each other.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
that energy. We all had that goal of like, no, we want to, we want to play. We had an adrenaline rush, I guess you can say, every time. We just talked about it, and it was definitely motivating to keep practicing, and then to keep doing it, and try to play the best that you can play.
Yeah. That's
You
great.
know, so
That's great.
yeah.
So after when Sal went and started playing with Tower Power, lessons stopped for you, or how, did you continue on? And I want to get to kind of how what led you to get into to where you are now with some of the
Yeah,
people that you studied with.
yeah. So Sal went on the road, and I kind of was just kind of on my own for about 2 years, and I was like, at that for some reason at that time I was like, well, he taught me a few things. He taught me how to play warm ups and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, I should be good. Like I'm good now, right? Like there's no more to this. Like it's cool, right? And well, I went through my sophomore year and junior year and like that, and I started playing. Thanks to Sal, I started playing a lot of lead. Sal really engraved that. He kind of taught me how to play all around the horn, but was my first introduction to playing in the higher register of the horn. And I kind of grasped onto it really well, and I got to the point where I could just do it. And then that led to once I was in high school to show up to school or show up to a rehearsal without even touching the horn maybe a day before or 2 days before sometimes when I have something going on and I just pull it out and I'd be like, yeah, it's cool, right? And I just go straight into playing, or sometimes at school I just wouldn't even I'd show up, I wouldn't even warm up before band, I just go in and boom, let's go. So I think that it started kind of creating some bad habits for me, that I was able to play, but it was just bad habits were coming, and it wasn't until probably my junior year when I was in the Colburn. I was at the Colburn School. It was another program that I did, which that one I was on scholarship at the Colburn School because of Sal and the director there, Lee Seacart, who's what, oh man, he's one of the best jazz educators I've ever been with, and he's still running the big band at Colburn. And I was in their the first big band they put together at that school ever.
Oh, wow.
I was the lead player for them. I was the first one, and I remember being the youngest one in that section, I think. And it was awesome. Lee was just right out of the bat. He's like, "You're gonna be my lead player. You're gonna play lead, and we're gonna help you out." Like, awesome, and that was 3 of the best years of my life that in that band. Being under the direction of Lee Seacard, and he just helped tremendously. He always cared about me every time. Every time I had trouble with something, he was like, well, what's going on? Why is it? Why? And so it was until my junior year. It was my second year in that band, and I was having trouble the second semester playing, and I was kind of falling apart in certain places, and just stuff wasn't sounding good. I was having a lot of trouble, and there'd be days when I'd walk in and I was solid, and there'd be days where I'd walk in and I was solid for the first tune, and then the second tune was just, ugh, and then the rest of the rehearsal was just awful. So I was really having a lot of issues with my chops and just breathing and trying to keep my head on straight, I guess you can say. Um, and so Lee Seacard was the one that was came up to me and was like, "Hey, like you need to fix this, because you can't go on into college. Like college is coming up, auditions are coming up. You can't show up playing like that, man. Like you gotta fix this. Like you gotta do something." I'm like, "Well, I don't, Sal. I can call Sal when he's home, but he's on the road a lot." He's like, "No." He's like, you need to go study with someone else that's really like that's home and that's going to be able to like fix all this stuff." And that's when he suggested I go study with Charley Davis, who's been my teacher since. And he was like, "You need to go study with Charley. Like he's the guy you need to go study with. He's the guy you need to go see. Like he will fix you." And at the beginning I was like, "Okay, like yeah, like I'll sure, like I'll do it." But I never really got around to calling Charley. I always just kind of put it off. One, I was nervous because my first interaction with Charley was it was probably one of the summers when I was doing a Sweden Hot Jazz Festival with Jazz America. He was playing with a bunch of the bands there, and I wanted to go see him play with the Jack Sheldon Orchestra, and I didn't know who he was. My dad and I were like, "Oh, let's walk into this room. There's a big band playing. Let's go watch him." I was like, "All right, cool, let's go watch him." And Charley happened to be playing lead for that band. I think the section was Charley Davis, Stan Martin, Ron Stout, who's an amazing jazz trumpet
Right.
player,
Yeah.
and I think Jeff Bonnell was also in that section. But I just remember like it was a powerhouse of a section. And so we went in there. We want to go see him, and right off the bat, the first tune, I was like hooked. I was like, "This is awesome, like cool." And then towards the end of the set, they had been playing for probably about an hour and a half already. Charlie is gonna do a solo, and he plays the one of the themes to Beauty and the Beast, Tale as Old as Time, and I have a recording of that on my Instagram. So if you guys want to check it out, it's on the Instagram. And I remember
Nice
sitting
plug.
there, yeah, right. So I remember sitting there and being in amazement because I had never really. It was before I met Sal, so I had never really heard anybody play that high on trumpet. At that point in time, I thought that was like how clarinet players squeak when they have they're messing with their reeds and stuff. When he'd play in the high register any instrument, I thought it was like, oh, like why are they squeaking? Like it sounds good, but that's weird. Like I wonder how you do that. And I remember sitting there and watching Charlie play, and he was just all over the horn. It's and one of the biggest trumpet sounds I had ever heard to date. It's just an amazement of it. So at the end of it, I went. We were walking out of the thing, and my dad's like, "Oh, you should go take a picture with Charlie. go say hi to the guy. Take a picture with him, get his autograph." I was like, "Nah, like I don't really know who he is. Like I'm probably never gonna see him again. Like, nah, we should just leave. Like, let's go. And my dad's like, no, like go. Like, you push me to go say hi to him. Like, okay, fine. I'll walk up to the old man and say hi. And I've told Charlie this story a couple of times, and he just laughs. He gets a kick out of it. But so I go up to him and I'm like, oh, hey, sir. I'm Carlos. I'm a trumpet player. I really loved your playing. I was wondering if I could take a picture with you and get your autograph. And he looks at me. He's like, why? I'm like, I don't know. My dad told me to do it. And he's laughing. He's like, okay, well, fine. He signs. I used to carry a little booklet around and get autographs. And I don't have it here with me, but I know it's at home. And the booklet's just full of just people that I've met and stuff. And he signed my booklet, and I took a picture with him. And it was funny. So then I just laughed, and I was like, cool. Never gonna see him again, probably.
And then
And
years later, you got to call
years
him up.
later, yeah, I gotta call this guy, and I'm like, oh man, like I'll call him. Like, yeah, sure, I'll call him. So, so then it wasn't until I think it was about a month after he told me I should call him. I went to go see Arturo Sandoval play at this park, and Arturo does his thing, and it was, he sounded great. This was probably 2011.
Okay.
Probably around that time, so it was a while ago, and oh geez, almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's 10 years ago now. And so I remember hearing, I was there, and my dad and I were there. My dad, he was always great. My family was always great. They always drove me everywhere. They were always supporting me, and my sister and I, and they did it so we could do get into college and have that motivation to do something, and they were always great. My sister was always great. My mom, my dad never stopped supporting me, and stuff. And I appreciate them and what they did, and all the jazz concerts they had to sit through just so
Yeah.
I could go watch this stuff, but so I remember my dad and I were there, and at the end of the concert, my dad's like, oh, you should go get, we should go say hi to Arturo, because he was signing posters and stuff. I was like, yeah. So we walk over, and I think he signed a CD and a poster that I had taken with me. And then I hear some like grumpy old man, kind of in the background, like, making a fuss at someone. I'm like, whatever, okay. And he's kind of like, making his way up to the table through the back, and I think security was kind of like, oh, like, sir, you can't be back here. Like, what do you mean I can't be back here? Of course I can be back here. And he just plows through this crowd of people, through these security guards, and it's this guy, old man standing behind. I call him an old man, he's gonna kill me, but this older guy, standing behind Arturo, telling him how well he did. And I hear Arturo, Charlie, oh, thanks. I'm like, oh no, it's Charlie. Oh no.
Oh.
And then so he's saying hi to Arturo and all this stuff, and I'm like, I kind of yell back like, hey Charlie, trying to see if he probably remembered me. And he looks at me, he's like, aren't you supposed to call me? And I'm like, oh man. I remember Arturo Sandoval was sitting there, and he's like, yeah, hey man, why haven't you called him, man? You should be calling him. You should Charlie
Oh,
Davis,
that's great.
call him. And I'm like,
Call
oh no. Like, oh man. And Charlie's like, make sure you call me. He's like, it's been a month. Lee Seacard called me. Make sure you call me. And I'm like, oh, damn. Like, he put me on the spot.
Yeah, I'll say.
So I got my stuff signed by Arturo, and I told my dad, I'm like, I should go run and find him and just, call him, and I should just go run and find him, and like tell him I'm gonna see if I can get his number. And my dad's like, okay, we'll go, I'm gonna go. Like, so I'm like running after him, like in this park full of people, and I see Charlie up ahead, walking his dog. His dog, Monk. His name is Monk. He's a little beagle, and it's Charlie, walking with his dog, and I run up to him like, hey, like Charlie, like, yo, hold up,
Yo.
go, wait, wait for me, and he looks and he's like, oh, what do you want? I'm like, by the way, hi. I'm like, I'm supposed to call you, I know. He's like, well, why haven't you called me? And I'm like, I'm nervous, man. And he's like, well, nervous about what? He's like, it's your trumpet playing we're talking about. He's like, call me. I'm like, okay. I'm like, can I get your number then? He's like, no. He's like, go home, go on, go on the union website, look me up, and call me. He's like, I'll be expecting your call tomorrow. I'm like, oh, great. Like, okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, then I go to my dad. I'm like, okay, well, he's mad at me. He told me to call him. He's like, okay, well, you better do it. I'm like, fine. I'm like, yeah. So I remember that same night I get home and I look him up and I'm like, cool. I have, both of his numbers down in his email. So I send him an email that night, and then I call him the next morning, like, maybe I think it was during like our recess at school. I snuck into the
Okay.
band room and I called him, and I set up my first lesson for that weekend. And I showed up, and it was my first introduction to his approach to trumpet playing, which is the Adam approach to trumpet playing. And it from there it just he broke me down and pretty much restarted me as a player and showed me how to play the horn inside and out. And it's been a long haul since. But I he was really the one that fixed me and really just helped me get back on it with trumpet. Because like I said, when I got to him, it was, man, it was hard. It was
Hmm.
not doing well. It was just not happening. You know, and then that led me on to for college. He was, when I got there, he's like, okay, well, we got to fix you up, and we got to get you ready for auditions. He's like, so where do you want to go to school? I'm like, well, I'm applying to Northridge and Long Beach. I'd love to go to USC, UCLA, and maybe the East Coast. I don't know. Those are the schools I'm looking for. And Charlie looks at me. He's like, well, how are your grades? And I'm like, well, they're there, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, from the sound of that, I think we need to maybe make some adjustments on where you want to go to school. And he was right about that. At the time, I was like, well, what do you mean, like, and I remember applying to those schools and getting rejected, mostly because my grades, and then I finally realized that my trumpet playing at the time was just not going to get me into the schools. I was not at that point in my playing. I was lacking a lot of fundamental work. I was lacking a lot of just the fundamentals. I guess is just the main thing I was lacking. So I remember I started studying with Charlie the summer of my junior year, and I was going over and I'd help him out. Lessons with him were pricey, so I told him, look, like, I can't really afford much. My parents, they're just on a tight budget. It's hard for me to get lessons. And he was like, okay. He's like, it's fine. He's like, we'll work something out. So I paid him for the first lesson, and then every lesson after that was me going over to his house, and helping him out, or fix things, mowing his lawn, or helping him, clean up the garage, anything that he could find for me to do to help him out with, I would be there and I'd do it, and then I'd get there in the morning, we'd play for about 2 or 3 hours, or until I couldn't play anymore, and then we'd go work stuff, work on stuff, he'd take me out to lunch, and then we'd come back and keep going and stuff. And that was the beginning to that. And then through there, my senior year came along, and I was still studying with him. And it just took me a while, just because there was a lot of issues I just had to iron out. And I really didn't really know how to practice. I thought I knew how to practice, but it was not. It just wasn't really doing it the way I should have been doing.
Sure.
And so then it's my senior year in high school, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go. And Charlie's just like, well, you should go to Citrus College. He's like, go to Citrus. He's like, I teach there. He's like, and there's another teacher there named Robert Slack, who's another great trumpet player and a great teacher. He's like, you should go to Citrus. They have a great big band, a great program. It really help you out. You could continue to work on this without having the pressure of being at a university and spending all this money. I'm like, all right, well, I'll see it. I tell my parents about it, and they're kind of like, well, it's far from home. It's out there. They're living out in West LA, and I had to drive all the way out here to Azusa, Glendora. So it was like I wasn't really sure about doing it. We were kind of hesitant on it. So
Hmm.
I told Charlie that, and Charlie's like, well, the Battle of the Big Bands is coming up. You should go check him out, and reconsider it. Go see him, and go see Robert Slack, and talk to him. I'm like, okay, fine. So I called, Mr. Slack for the first time, and he already know who I was, and he's like, okay. He was like, well, Are you gonna come see the show? I'm like, yeah, like I'd love to. He's like, okay, well, I'll reserve some tickets for you and come see the show. I'm like, okay. So we show up, the four of us, and I mean, we're blown away by both APU's band and Citrus's band. I mean, at that time, the bands were roaring. I mean, the guys in there were just playing their asses off, man. And no other way I can put it. And so at the end of the concert, I was like, yep, like okay, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to come. I want to start my college career. I want it to be here. And the guys in the Richard Carey was playing lead for APU at the time. The guys at Citrus, one of my best friends, Hayden Ortiz and Mike Ruiz were playing in the section. Michael was, for his age, he was just a phenomenal lead player. I mean, I had never heard someone 2 or 3 years older than me, or 2 years older than me. I think he's actually 2 years older than me. Play with that amount of power, and I was just blown away. And the other two guys in the section, Mark and Josh, were just great friends of mine. And I was just like, that's where I want to go. So I want to go talk to Mr. Slack after that, and we set it up. And sure enough, I enrolled for the fall, and it was all work from there. I showed up and I had my first lesson with Charlie, and his words were, okay, you're out of high school, you're in college. Now I can really break you down and start you over. And that was, man, the hardest year of my life.
Right.
I came in playing, on a really, really shallow mouthpiece. I call it the wall with a hole in it. That's pretty much what it was. And then I showed up, and Charlie and Mr. Schlack put me on a 7C.
Okay.
They put me on a 7C, and I at one point I couldn't play past the G or past the C in the staff. I just could not do it, and it was, man, it was brutal. I at that point I was like, maybe I just shouldn't do this. I just wanted to be done with it, give up, and no, I don't want to do it. Don't want to do it. And yeah, and it's, but I kept coming back. One, because the guys there were really, they were really encouraging. All those guys had been through some kind of embouchure change or some kind of like change in setup, for the better. So they had all been there, and all the guys were really encouraging about it. And Mr. Slack, never failed to encourage me, even though I was having a bad lesson.
Okay.
I'd go in there and it'd just be rough, and he'd just be like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Go out there and just keep practicing. It'll turn itself around. Go fire it up. Don't worry about it. The most important thing is sound. Just think of sound. Don't think about anything else. Just sound." And same thing with Charlie. Charlie go in there, and Charlie knew I was just gonna have a rough time, and he, I thank them to this day for the patience they had with me, because man, I think about it, and I sit there and I'm like, man, I put these guys through that, like that. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So, then after some time, it just started, things kind of started getting better. I had started developing better practice habits. My practicing actually, you know, was actually a practice session. It wasn't like I just go in there and just mindlessly do these things. No, now I'd go in there with a plan, and everything I did was for a purpose. I played every exercise with a purpose, which is what Mr. Slack and Charlie always talked about. The purpose behind the exercise, why we do them. Yeah, and then things just started getting better after that. It took a long time. It really took about 3 years for me to really just be like, okay, I think I'm back to square. I think I'm back. I'm out of that hole, and I can kind of do something with this. And yeah, it's just it was that, and then I hit that point where I was like, okay, I was doing decent again. I was playing again, and I was able to, I could hold my ground, in the big band and stuff like that. And then it was I just, I was just playing at the school and I was really just bummed about it. It's like, oh, well, I'm not doing much. All my friends are out working and stuff. And then my best friend, Alan Valadares, came in one day, who was a former student of Mr. Slack. He just came in just to show one of his students around and try to get him to go to the school. And he sat in with a big band and he heard me play. And he, you know, took my number down. I was like, hey, he's like, you sound great. Let me get your number just in case anything comes up. And that same weekend, he called me for a gig. He's like, hey, I need another guy. Like, you sounded great. You should be fine. Can you do it? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, sure, I'll do it. And it was really thanks to him too that I started really going out and wanting to play trumpet even more. He gave me that first opportunity to see what it was really like to work outside of school, in the real world, I guess you can say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and and then just like I said, guys like him, my buddy Nick Bruno and Hayden, when we practice together, because we rest as much as you play. So one guy plays one thing while the other guy's resting. You go back and forth. We trade off on these things, and that was probably one of the greatest things I learned at Citrus is we're all in it for the same end result, for the same end goal. Our goal is to be the best that we can be there, whether it's on trumpet or on anything else you're doing. But the worth ethic, has to be there. Like I said, it's just I learned so much from my time at Citrus, and at first, friends would, give me hell like, oh, why are you still there? Why this? Because, I don't want to leave because I don't feel like I'm ready to leave. I don't feel like my playing is where it should be, and I really, really want to work on it. And I spent 4 years there, but it was 4 of the best years of my life. And for the hardest working, I'm still doing it. But 4 of probably the bloodiest, sweatiest, teariest years of my life, if that makes any sense,
And then
So,
you carried all that work ethic with you when you went to APU, when you moved on to APU.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that was one of my biggest things. At home with my father, the same thing. Worth ethic was the biggest thing with my mom and my dad. That was the biggest life lesson that my parents could ever teach me was work ethic. Worth ethic. You have to work hard. We work hard for you guys, so you guys don't have to, have to struggle through this, and alongside with my parents, having that support with them and that mindset of working hard and that worth ethic, is, and then going over to Citrus and having seen that same thing with Mr. Slack and then Charlie, it was kind of always, ingrained at that point. And, by the time I got to APU, that was like the thing, it was like, no, every exercise, everything I do when I pick up the horn, it's just work. You work and you strive to be the best that you can be. And you strive to just play with the most beautiful sound you can play with.
So it's the intent and purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The intent and purpose are the most important things about for anything really. Whether you want to be a musician, a lawyer, a doctor, a pilot, anything. The purpose of what you're doing it for is to succeed and to be great at it. And that's one of the best things I learned. Mr. Slack was always like, no, like the end goal has to be the purpose for it. Why are you doing this? There has to be a purpose behind it. You're doing it. It's just that mindset. So I transferred that mindset over to APU, and it's a different environment at APU, definitely.
Okay.
A lot of the guys there, I say it all the time, the guys at APU that don't go through Citrus and start right off at APU, they tend to have a harder time with it, I think, because they're not around it. Mr. Slack, he's not always on campus, and whereas at Citrus, we all showed up at 7 a.m., and we'd all get there, and we were going at 7 a.m., we were going. And the greatest thing about that is that Mr. Slack's office was in the practice room area, so if you were in the practice room and you guys would get there, we'd all get there around the same time, the first thing you hear is, Mr. Slack, blowing pipe. And it was like, man, okay, that's what it's supposed to sound like. And, in your own practice room, you'd emulate it. You'd emulate that. And you just hearing him practice in the morning, there was nothing more motivating than that. Or even Charlie, you were in the practice room, and you just tried to emulate the way they sounded, no matter what, try to play with that beautiful sound, no matter what, And So at APU, I kind of I felt a little not discouraged, but I felt kind of I felt like it was very, you know, it was just different.
Okay.
I missed that whole thing of having Mr. Slack there with me. I missed, that. But at the same time, it was like, well, you know what? Like, I should use this to really be able to do it myself, encourage myself. One, because Mr. Slack and Charlie, they're not going to be here forever, and it's one of those things like, well, if I can't motivate myself or if I can't get that end goal in my mind myself, then then what's going to happen when they're not here and it happens, type of
Right.
thing. Like I'm in this rut, so I grew in that aspect at APU. I guess you can say, like, mindset wise, I grew with that, or it's not that I grew, but it's helped me grow with that,
Sure. Sure.
and applying all that just to and showing the guys at APU, helping them out. And that's my biggest thing, helping them out. I never, I always tell the guys, I'm like, look, I know I can come off as, sometimes being a hard ass, but I don't do it because I hate you guys by any means. I do it because it's what I went through and it's what helped me. And I want all of you guys to succeed because we're all after that end goal. We're all after that, being the best that we can be. We all do it because we love it. And nothing wrong with helping each other out.
Sure. And I wanted to ask you, moving on, um, kind of your mindset playing as a kind of a lead player in big bands,
Yeah.
um, versus being a sectional player in a big band, and then kind of your mindset as being a principal in a wind orchestra
Right.
compared to being a section player in a wind orchestra. So you can pick
Well,
which one you want to kind of
yeah.
tackle first there.
Well, at the end of the day, they're every part's important. That's one of that's one thing we always have to remember. Every part is important. Bud Herseth said the same thing. Bud Herseth was the principal player for the Chicago Symphony. Without the second trumpet player, the principal trumpet player is just sitting up there naked with nothing around. You know, to me, I learned it the hard way. That a section player is just as important as any other member of the group of the section. As important as a lead player, third player. It's all every part's important. And it's one of the things I learned at Sitch, the hard way. And I say it the hard way because Mr. Slack, he came after me at it, but he's like, you no matter what book you're playing it like you have to play it like you're playing the lead book, the principal book, however you want it. You have to play it like you're playing the first part. Obviously you don't want to overpower the first trumpet player, right? If you're playing lead or principal, whoever that is, you respect what he does and you respect his choices, whether you agree with it or not. He got called to do that, and you follow that unless someone else says otherwise, unless the leader says otherwise. You
Yeah,
know,
that's great. That's great. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you talked about studying with Charlie and
mm-hmm.
Mr. Slack,
Yeah,
or Mr. Davis and Mr. Slack,
yeah.
um, how they taught you how to practice. So I wanted to ask you some of your thoughts on what goes into your practice. Obviously it's a little different now, but before, pre-pandemic, what
Yeah.
were how were you practicing? What were your thoughts on what you wanted to accomplish during your practice session?
Well, pre-pandemic, I've been fortunate enough to work every, if it wasn't every other weekend, every weekend to be out playing. Sometimes even Thursday through Sunday, Friday through Sunday, just Saturday, Sunday. And it's a different experience playing out live than it is playing at home in your own comfort zone, right? You know, so pre-pandemic, a lot of my practicing was, yes, obviously to get better, and be able to go out and do things, but also a lot of it was kind of like putting yourself back together. The way I
Okay.
look for it, because you go out and you play a gig, whether it's a Latin gig, a pop gig, or whatever it is, you're playing pretty hard out there. One, because the sound systems, they're cranked, they're just cranked nowadays, and depending on the settings, you're also battling with bass amps, guitar amps, vocalists that are just, their mics are just hot. So at the end of the day, you're working. It's a workout, you know, and it takes a toll on you. It bruises you up. It's just what it is. So a lot of the times, getting back, Monday morning, and just ironing yourself out, getting it back to square one. You come in, you're puffy, you're swollen, you're spread. Cool. You're not going to go in there and just hit it like you weren't feeling any of that, like you were fresh and brand new. You're going to go in there to calm everything down and bring everything back to place and be able to play with the most beautiful sound. So a lot of my practice before that was really how to maintain myself.
Okay.
Being out working quite a bit and doing school and stuff. How to maintain myself, and alongside with that, how to also get better and move ahead in my studies with trumpet. And I definitely the Adam approach to it has been what I'm doing. I also do a lot of this stamp approach to it, which helped tremendously. And it's on a regular basis. I'll read off what I was doing, and it wasn't really so much before pre-pandemic. I've kind of kept my routine all through it, and I like mixing it up just to keep everything fresh. But like I have my sheet here where I write everything down, my checklist, I guess you can say.
Okay.
My Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday things are you blow pipe, then I go straight into Clark 2, slowly, not too fast, play everything with a beautiful sound. Then I go into long tones or the Chickowitz flow studies. From there, I go into Clark 1, into chromatic triplets, in the Arbin's book, maybe, either one of those. And then from there, I do Schlossberg number 6, exercise number 6, or I do the stamp exercises, and obviously, as I'm doing all this, I don't do all of it back to back. I do it, and you rest as much as you play. You take your time with it, especially if you were out playing hard the night before. You don't want to go in there and pound it out. You want to go in there and let it slowly settle itself down. Or else you're just gonna jack yourself up even more, which is what you don't want, right?
Right.
So it's always great to practice with someone, because then that really enforces the taking your time with things. And it helps you rest as much as you play. You play it one time, and then the other guy, you rest while the other guy is playing it. And it also helping each other out. If the other guy has a better sound than you do, you're gonna strive to sound just as good as him, or do even better. And it's like with everything, it's just makes practicing more worthwhile for me.
Yeah,
Feed off
that's
of each
good.
other.
That's good. And I like your list too. I didn't
Yeah.
like I never really had a physical list of anything.
Mhm.
And it wasn't really until the Tom Hoon, I don't remember if you were part of
Yeah.
that, the online session he did
Yeah.
in the
I
summer
was
last
there for
year.
a little bit. Yes.
Okay, and he talked about that, and like
Hmm.
in an email he sent, he had this list
Yeah.
of different things he did, and he would
Right.
mark them off as he did them, so
Hmm.
that way he can see what he already did
Right.
and what he did the least amount of, and then he would make that be something he
Right.
would focus on, as opposed to kind of just doing scales every day.
Right.
Well, if I'm doing
Exactly.
scales, then let me do something different, arpeggios or something
Exactly.
else. So
Hmm.
I like that. I like that. I didn't start doing that until
Yeah.
more recently.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the reason we have this list is it's a list our teacher put together. He's like, look, these are the things you
okay.
should be doing. And then I took the list he gave us, and I made my own little, and I carry my journal around, made my own little journal to write down, okay, this is what I did on this day, this day, this is what I need to work on, this is what I need to do more of, you know. So like, this list kind of covers trumpet all around. We have, like I said, the Schlossberg, the stamp, and then we go into the Glantz studies. He does them in keys. So on the list, I had 1 key per day. And now, that was back when I was at Citrus. Now I'm probably doing 2 keys, 3 keys per day.
Okay.
Depending on what I need to do, or time wise. And then Schlossberg is a big thing. Like here we have Schlossberg. I do number 23, 24, 25, 27, 31, 13, 4, 15, 14, 17, 95.
Okay.
Right? Like I would do those. And then from there we go to Schlossberg number 97. We do them in the keys of A, B flat, B, and all the different keys. And we try to expand it too, expand it going up and going down, and it's not really, for that machismo thing. It's more for trying to stay relaxed through the
Okay.
whole,
Flexible.
yeah, through the whole thing. You want to be as relaxed as you can be through all parts of playing of the horn. You never want tension in your playing. We tend to expand things to practice that, to not to be able to do things without tension in them. Without grunting things out when they're not supposed to be grunted out and stuff like that, right?
Right.
We do a lot of Schlossberg, Schlossberg number 98, and then Arbens pages 39 through 41, Goldman studies, the Ernest Williams scales drills, more Arbens 175 through 179, 162s through 163, and then we do Getchels. Getchels are these books that Getchel, the guy's name is Getchel, and there's like really easy little songs in them, like easy, like quarter notes, eighth notes, and then they get harder and harder to book two as through the end of book one into book two. But we do these Getchels, and we do them in all 12 keys, or that's the goal.
Okay.
We learn the book in C, obviously, to get that sound in there, and then Mr. Stock would be like, okay, well, you did it in B flat, now go do it in C. But I don't want you writing anything in. No, I want you to sit there and
Transpose it.
Yeah, transpose it and sing it in C. Sing it through and then play it. Okay, you did that. Okay, now do it, up a third, up, down, minor third. Just do it in different keys. But his biggest thing is singing before you play it. If you can sing it, you can play it. That just goes true to all of it, And so with these Getchels, we play them, and it's gotten to the point now where I'll sit down with one of my buddies and we'll play Getchels, and we'll play the first one in B flat, and the next one we'll play in the key of F, and the next one we'll play it in the key of E flat, and then the key of G. So we start jumping around, to different keys, just so you also keep the wheels in your head turning, and you figure out how to transpose these things, because in an orchestra everything's in a different key. It's never, no stuff is rarely just in the key of B flat for trumpet. You're in F sometimes, you're in C sometimes, and everything just jumps around. So doing that, really, by the time I got to APU and I was playing the orchestra there, transposing was like, okay, cool, trumpet and F. You do the math in your head and everything. It's like, okay, and then you sing it, and boom, you go. So that's what the goal of doing the Getchels is for. Or you never know when you're going to be on stage. It happened to me a couple times where we were on stage and a singer walks up, hey guys, I want to do the song, but in this key. And you're like, okay, hold on. So that's how it goes. Okay, she wants it in this key. Okay, boom. All right, let's do it. So it's just, at first when I first started doing this, I was like, oh, these things are dumb. Like, I don't want to do them. Like, they're just dumb. But now it's like, okay, this is why we do it. Cool. So it's just, you just got to be ready for it.
Yeah, transposition is you got to be ready. Funny story.
Mm-hmm.
I played with a community group.
Yeah.
This is what, my junior year in college.
Yeah.
And so it was Beethoven. I don't remember which symphony it was, but it was Beethoven symphony. We had the parts in B flat. I had been reading the parts in B flat, into all the rehearsals. They had a ringer come in, a person who, come in, and they had parts in trumpet in D.
Yep.
So then, I go in there. It was a big mess. I was there. I was there, and then I guess they didn't realize I was there, so they brought in somebody else to play too, and then it was like, well, he's been reading the parts in B flat. We need to read the parts in D because it's gonna give a better performance. Apparently, they're the same. The notes were the same. It was just one part was written in B flat, the other was written in D. So we set up. I set up for that half. They're playing the other half. I go on. So I had my music up there, prepared everything so that I can just go. Music's gone.
Yeah.
Music's not there. And I'm like, where's my B flat music? And I go, hey, I asked the other guy, I go, hey, do you know where the B flat music, where my sheet music went? And he's like, I don't know. I can't help you.
Oh, man. Someone's playing tricks on you, man.
So, yeah. So I said, all right, whatever. So then, I just sight read. So I sight read that whole symphony, and I go, okay, well, I did some transposition, as part of my practicing. I'm just gonna have to suck it up and do it. I was proud of myself. I missed one note because it was an
Yeah.
accidental, because it's
Yeah.
mostly
Oh yeah.
ba 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 ba
Right.
ba 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 ba. So it's like, okay, ba ba ba. It's some
Yeah.
syncopation going on. So there
Right.
was finally an accidental, like in the third movement
Mm-hmm.
of the symphony,
Yeah.
and I whispered it because I knew it was wrong. So like it
Yeah.
wasn't audible, but like that person turned and like glared at me,
Oh
and
yeah.
and it's like whatever, I had learned it already in B flat, you
Mm-hmm.
know, somebody obviously took it,
Right.
um, and
Right.
then
Right.
I had to be forced to read in D, but it worked out.
Yeah.
It was a good life lesson. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
do those Getchell
Yeah.
studies and
The
learn the
Getchell
different
books.
keys.
Right. And I mean those books. I mean they're probably like $10 at most. And trust me, they're the easiest tunes in the world. And they get harder as they go. But once you start transposing them, they're not the easiest tunes in the world anymore. But those are great. I do so I we'd sit down and maybe do like a whole book at some point.
Okay.
Just going through the whole thing. And obviously we play a lot of just repertoire, solos, Charliers, etudes, trying to just as much music as you can because that's the most important thing. Being able to play music. Like you can do all the exercises in the world, but if you can't, do things musically, then there's what's the point of doing all the exercises? You doing the exercises, yeah, you sound fine, but if they give you a lyrical line and you're at a pop gig, I don't know, you get a lyrical opening, then
You play
you
everything
got to be able to
staccato.
do it
Yeah.
right. So I tend to practice all these things just to be safe. You never know
Okay.
when something's gonna come up. So I'm on my Charlier books. I love the Soneticore book, Veneto Bosch, the Biche book. What's that other one? Bosquet. And even the tunes in the Arbenz book. Anything etude related, lyrical. I love. I'll play. For days. And then transcriptions too. We can't forget about
Okay.
jazz. I love playing jazz, and I'll sit down and I'll read through transcriptions of the metronome. Sometimes just read them for reading purposes, so I can get that going, and then transcribing. It's really important to transcribe. Being able to transcribe stuff is really important. Whether you write it down or you memorize it, people say one thing's better than the other. To be honest, it's the goal is to be able to play things when you hear them. Being able to hear something and play it. So whatever flows for you at that point. And I've done stuff where I've written them down, and I've done stuff where I've memorized them. And they
Sure.
both work for me too. So a lot of music, a lot of in different styles.
Yeah.
Never be embarrassed of practicing different styles. If you get a Latin gig and you got to practice the music, don't be embarrassed. Practice it. You got to sound good on the gig. You got to keep the gig. And so be able to play everything. That's
Yeah.
always been my thing. Be able to be ready for anything. If I get called to do something, I want to be ready for it. Like I was telling you before the interview, I just got called to play with a mariachi group, and really, it's not my strongest. It's not my forte, but it's a new experience. And it's something new to work on. It's a very different style from salsa or merengue or cumbia or even jazz or Latin jazz or pop or anything like that. It's
Sure.
different. It's got its own set of like things that are tough. And but you never know. You never know. So I'm always open to being ready for everything.
Okay.
Be practice for everything. You never know, especially as a trumpet player. You got to be ready for everything and anything. That.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I wanted to ask you as we're closing down our interview, a couple of last questions.
Mhm.
Um, one skill that you would like to work on, one skill that you'd like to improve on.
Being able to just sit down and read,
Okay.
whatever it is. My readings, gotten a lot better than what it was. But there's obviously every now and then some hiccups.
Okay.
And I being able to just do what guys like Sal and Charlie and Wayne Bergeron and Malcolm, well, who I love Malcolm. I've been studying with Malcolm, for about a year and a half now. Oh, you remember we were at the McNabb camp,
Right.
and Malcolm has been great. I still see him. He's awesome.
Yeah.
Malcolm's awesome, and being able to do what he does, John Lewis, Dave Washburn, all those guys being able to just sit down and read it. That's that's what I practice for nowadays. That's what I'm working on. That's what I want to get better. That's I want to be that guy. They call it that guy can read anything down, any style, anything he can do it. That's ultimately the goal.
Yeah,
You know,
that's a good goal. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. What was one of the last songs you listened? I'm sorry. What was one of the last songs you've listened to?
This morning actually, I listened to um Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony, but his second movement.
Okay.
This morning, I was listening to it, before class, just put my thing on shuffle for the 10 minutes before class, and it was the first one that came on, and I was one of my favorite movements of the symphonies. I love
Okay.
it. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, great, great. And then a fun question here. How many trumpets do you own?
Oh, oh no. Well, you got lucky. I actually have all my horns down here today.
Oh, okay.
So let's see. Where do I start? Where do I start? Where do I start? Jesus. Okay. Well, here we go. Oh boy. Okay. So my first horn that I did all my stuff in high school with and everything was a Bach TR-300.
Okay.
And the one before that was the Jean Baptiste, and I got it when I was in 5th grade, and I used it, and then it just kind of fell apart on me. We were broke. That's all we
Yeah.
had.
No, I was there. I was same boat.
Yeah,
Same boat. I had a TR-300 until college.
yeah. Well, the TR-300 I had until like my senior year maybe, and I beat the crap out of that horn. I did, I think, 3 rose parades with it, and every audition I ever had, it was a great horn. And to this day, I pull it out, and I'm like, it's not a bad horn, you know.
Right.
But then after that, I got a Bobby Shoe 8310Z. I got the flugelhorn and the trumpet. I got them both. It was a gift from my father and my grandfather. They bought me the horns, and they worked great. I still have the flugelhorn. It's probably the best flugelhorn I've ever played, and I've tried a bunch of them, and I just love that flugelhorn. The trumpet was good. I just really wasn't my sound that I was going for. I loved it, but it wasn't my favorite. You know, and then when I got to Citrus, they were all playing on Box. And I was like, well, I guess I'll try a Bach. And I was playing on a TR-300. Maybe, we'll see what's up. And I was playing on one of Mr. Slack's Box. And, I fell in love with the horn. I loved it. It was a 37. And so I played that for a while. And I got my own 43, a lightweight 43 that, plays great. And Charlie's, tweaked it and done his thing with it. And it was awesome. So I have my 43 down here. It's a little beat up. So here's my 43. It's from, I checked the serial number. I think it's from 1972.
Okay.
And stuff, and it's a great horn.
No, I liked it when we messed around
right.
in the back.
Yeah.
When we were messing around in the back and we switched horns.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have my 43 here. I love the horn. And then that same horn that I was telling you about that Mr. Slack let me play when I was at Citrus, he actually gifted to me.
Oh wow.
So I have his 37 right here, and it's a beautiful horn. A completely different character than the 43.
Mm-hmm.
This horn it's got that huge box sound, and I love it, and it's a gift from my teacher, so I'm cherishing it, and I pulled them out because I was cleaning them. I usually pull them out every other year or so or 6 months just to make sure they're still running and clean, just to play them. I love playing all the horns. I love playing different horns. So I have that one. I have my C trumpet. That's a Bach 239G, a gold brass bell, completely gold plated, that I bought
Nice.
maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. I bought it. 25A pipe, 239G bell. It's a tunable bell.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
Cool.
But I love the horn. I love the horn. The guy that sold it to me was one of the guys on eBay, and told him I was a broke college student, and he took a great chunk off the price, and it was awesome. And Charlie, I took it over to Charlie. Charlie's the guru, man. I took it over to him and had him play test it, and he did a few things to it, and took it to Bob Reeves. All my horns go to Bob Reeves for valve alignments and their acid baths and everything, and I love it. It's a great horn. I love my C trumpet. And then I have this Canstel E flat. horn. That's kind of a loan from my teacher, too. It's a cancel E flat. I don't know much about it, but it plays pretty great. I'll be playing this on playing the Haydn on this for my recital this semester, so that'll be fun. I'm still trying to learn my way around it,
Sure.
but it's fun. I love it. It's a great horn. And then I have a piccolo, a cancel piccolo. Cancel piccolo, um, which I'm also getting used to. I don't play much piccolo, so I'm trying to change that. Like I said, when I warm up in the morning, and then after that, I take a break and I go straight into music, and I even if it's just playing something on B flat and then transposing it into E flat, and then picking up the E flat and playing it in E flat. I try to use everything every day.
Right.
I just to stay in shape with everything. So, a cancel piccolo trumpet.
And that's the one that's on Mr. Slack's on the top of his shelf, right? On his office.
Yes. Yeah, no. This is the one that's in his office, up on the top shelf, and so I've been playing this thing. And then funny thing, when I was at Citrus, I used to when we'd be in the studio and he'd leave us in there when he ran out. I'd pick up the horn and I'd try playing it. I just could never play it. And now it's like, at the time it was just I couldn't do it, just because I had all these issues going on, and then now it's like, oh, this is what it's supposed to sound like. And then I have my beauty, my pride and joy.
Yeah, the crown jewels.
The crown jewel, exactly. This is the Audi of my fleet.
Okay.
I love it. It's a Charley Davis trumpet. Charley, when his first prototype came out, I had just started studying with him, and he was still working on it, and it didn't come into production until maybe after I was at Citrus. But I remember playing the first prototype that he had, and I remember it was all right and stuff, and I was like, all right, like they're good. They play like Bach's. And then he kind of went into hiding with them for a little bit and came back, and they were like the best things in the world.
And what trumpet is this?
So this is a Charley Davis model. It's he goes by pipe. So this is the 25 pipe. This is a copy of his 37. This is 37 that everybody knows, his gold 37. It's a complete copy of it, down to the T. And it's also actually kind of a dud of a horn, which is why he kind of gave me a price cut on it. It was the last dud he had. And, the dud part was really that the logo is not supposed to have a ring around it, but it has a ring around it. So he's like, I can't sell that. So, we can work something out. I was like, sweet, let's do it. So I went over and I play tested this one and like two other ones. And this one was just, out of this world.
Mm-hmm.
It was awesome. I fell in love with it just from just by picking it up and playing the first notes into it. I fell in love with this horn, and it's awesome. I love it. I go back and I play the box now, and it's just like, it's just not the same. But yeah, this is a Charley 25 pipe. He has the S1, the S2, and I think he has an S6 and a 7.
Okay.
But they're all the other. I believe the 6 pipe is a copy of his New York, the Mount Vernon that he used to play on, which is a great one.
Okay.
And then the other ones I believe are copies of Cleartone trumpets, which
Okay.
are just, the other ones are just phenomenal too. I've never played, besides that first one, I've never played a bad Charley Davis horn ever.
Yeah. And this one's Cleartone, or this Charley Davis?
This is the Charley Davis. This is Charley Davis. His other horns, I believe, are just copies of the Cleartones, of the models. But this one right here is a copy of his 37.
Yeah.
The Cleartones were just a little too bright for me. Not really the sound I was looking for. And this one just, it's everything I've ever wanted in a horn.
Yeah, that's great.
And I worked all summer for the horn, and it was probably the longest summer of my life. I hated my life, but I got it, and it was worth every tear.
Yeah.
Every tear shed and everything else. It was worth it. It was worth it.
What's the next thing on your plate? What's the next horn on your list?
Oh, Man, the next horn on my list, I really want a rotary horn, a
Okay.
rotary trumpet. I want a C and a B flat rotary.
That's great.
Um,
Yeah. Hey, well, Carlos, we have to end the interview now. Thank you so much for your time and
of
your
course,
willingness to share your experiences and some of your thoughts on practicing and uh,
of course,
getting an
yeah,
inside look on what you use to
of
do what you
course. No,
do.
thank you, and thank you for having me on here and taking the time to hear what I have to say. you know, so yeah, thanks.
Great. Till next time, buddy.
See ya.